The letter arrived in the last week of winter, when the snow along the hedgerows turned to glass, and the road from Eredale to the river shone like a blade left half buried in the earth. Sir Corin found it beneath his door, pressed flat by a stone the size of a fist. He would have missed it if the wind had not rattled the shutters and let the cold creep across the floor to touch his bare feet like a cautious animal. He took up the letter with the same patience he brought to all old things. The wax seal wore a device he had not seen since the year of the harvest riots, a cross with 4 small circles at its points, as if a pilgrim's rosary had been hammered into iron and taught to shine. He knew that device. He had watched it lifted high in a procession through a city that no longer had a name, watched the faithful kneel, watched soldiers bow their heads with hands on swords, watched a child tumble in the crowd and rise with straw stuck to his hair, laughing at the miracle of dust. Sir Corin set the letter by the fire, sat at the table, and listened to the old cottage breathe. The rafters ticked. The kettle gave a single hollow knock, like a door somewhere inside him. He broke the seal at last and read, Sir Corin of Eredale, if you yet live, and if the snow has not sealed every path to the north, the brothers of St. Elm request your service. The Cross of Aelder must be borne to its shrine beyond the salt marsh and the blackwood hill. We have no rider left. The roads turn against us. Come if you remember the vows you made when the king was young. Come for the living. Come for the lost. By the hand of brother Matthias, whose voice you once heard in the ruined city of Ashen. Corin read it twice more, and then a third time, because names are a kind of bell, and sometimes you must ensure your own ears still work. He remembered Ashen. He remembered a street where the rain fell in ropes from the eaves, and the mud looked like bread dough, the way it kept the imprint of a man's heel long after he was gone. He remembered a young monk with frost on his eyebrows, who pressed a crust of bread into the hands of a soldier who had nothing left but iron. He remembered the Cross of Aelder, a modest thing really, no higher than a man's forearm, iron-bound oak with a circle of glass set at its heart. The glass had always puzzled him. It held a flaw like a trapped breath. He built the fire, drank the tea, and sharpened the small knife he used for everything but killing. When the sun lifted the frost to steam, he led his roan mare from the lean-to, saddled her beneath a sky as pale as a candle turned to smoke, and tied the letter into the binding of his glove, so that each movement of his hands would remember what he'd been asked to do. He closed the cottage door with 2 fingertips, the way you close the eyes of a friend. The road north had thawed to honest mud by noon. He passed a copse where the crows had learned to hop behind plows in the old days. Now they hopped between tracks left by wagons that did not return. At the river ford, a woman in a red shawl washed linens the color of old snow. She did not look up as he crossed. The sound of water over stone is the same in any century. It had been a comfort to him as a boy, and then for a long while it had not. Now it was a comfort again. There were signs of plague the way there are signs of a storm. Shutters nailed from the outside, doorpost chalk, a cart left half-turned in a lane. He touched the pommel of his sword, but did not draw it. Steel had no use against a sickness that did its work in dark rooms where a mother's voice became soft and then softer, like a bell carried away by fog. He kept to the wind side of the road, and breathed the air that smelled of thawed hay and ash. Near dusk a boy stepped from the reeds with a knife that would not have frightened a goose. "Stand," the boy said, "and show your purse. Stand with me and show me your courage." The boy blinked as if someone had thrown salt in his eyes. He held the knife lower and then lower still until it pointed at his own boot. "I am not a thief," which is what thieves say when the world has not yet taught them their names. "Good," Corin said. He dismounted slowly, letting the mare's breath fog into the boy's face so that he could know the warmth of another creature at the edge of winter. "How long since you ate, Yep?" "Since the river ran quick," the boy said, which is the kind of answer hunger gives you when days become a string without knots. Corin took from his saddlebag a heel of bread, a piece of cheese wrapped in cloth, and a small knife. Not his good knife, not the soldier's knife, but the one with the antler handle he used to peel apples. He put them in the boy's hand and closed his fingers around them, as if setting a stone so it would not roll away. "Take these," he said. "Eat half now, half when the stars are clear. The knife is yours if you promise me one thing." Jep looked at the antler handle as if it might be a living thing. "What promise?" "If any man offers you a way to live that requires you to widen your mouth wider than your heart, do not take it." The boy frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means a full belly is not worth a hollow chest," Corin said. He mounted again. "The road will be colder tomorrow. Go home if you have one." Jep stepped back. He did not thank him. Some gifts require no witness. He raised the antler-handled knife and watched it catch the last light, and then he turned and was gone into the reeds, which parted for him as easily as soft words. Corin touched the letter against his wrist. The mare shook her head and snorted, and they rode on.
The monastery of St. Elm lay where the land flattened into marsh, and the ash trees grew from black water like ghosts that had learned to stand. The building had been burned and built again twice in Corin's lifetime. Now it looked as if it were trying to remember a third shape. Smoke rose from one chimney. The bell tower had been left roofless. Snow had collected on the sill of the east window and slid down like a slow white waterfall whenever the wind turned. A gate of gray wood stood open. A monk waited in the yard with a lamp cradled between his palms like a mother holds a child. His face was as narrow as a shovel. Corin knew him even without the voice. He had the same close-set eyes and the same way of looking at you that was not quite straight, as if he preferred to see not your face but the air you displaced. "Brother Matthias," Corin said. The monk bowed. "Sir Corin," he said, "you have not grown shorter." "No," Corin said, "only slower." Matthias smiled with half his mouth. "In these days slowness is a mercy. The quick run past what needs seeing." They gave the mare oats and hay, rubbed her down until steam rose from her flanks, and set her in the warmest stall as if she were the only precious thing in the world. In the refectory they ate onion stew with barley and a thin beer that tasted of rain. Matthias did not speak until the bowls were empty and the lamp's oil had thinned so much that the flame made a sound like a sleeping child. "The cross is not itself," he said. Corin looked up. The monk's hands were folded in front of him, bare, long-fingered, the nails scrubbed to pink. "It is an iron-bound stick," Corin said. "Objects have no selves." "You have not forgotten how to play the soldier," Matthias said. "But I remember you kneeling once in Ashen when men were screaming outside the chapel. You were not a soldier then." "I was tired," Corin said. "That is closer to prayer than most words," he said, rosing. "Come." They crossed the yard to the small chapel, built as a foothold for hope, the kind of room that makes even an old man stand straighter. The Cross of Aelder lay across the altar, wrapped in a cloth the color of Hereth ash. Matthias drew the cloth away slowly. Corin saw again what he had carried once in a procession down a street where children learned to love the sound of bells. Oak, dark as a wet road, straps of iron hammered with 4 circles, the round pane of glass set at the crossing like an eye the world had not taught to close. "There," Matthias said. He brought the lamp close. A hairline crack feathered the glass from its center to the edge. It was fine, like the web a frost makes on a window if the night is gentle and the cold respects the day. "How?" Corin asked. "In the last thaw," Matthias said. "We keep the cross wrapped, we keep it warm, we keep it fed with prayer and with the breath of the dying. But the river rose and the wind turned, and the crack came as a long word comes from the mouth of a man who cannot bear what he knows." Corin leaned closer. In the flawed glass he saw a distortion of the lamp flame, one flame becoming 2, and then 1 again whenever Matthias moved. "The cross must be tarried to the shrine of Aelder's Hill beyond the marsh. The old books say that once, in the time before the king used his first sword as a mirror, the cross was made there. They say the glass saint who made it could hear a river in stone. They say if the cross returns to what shaped it, what is cracked can be made whole." "They say many things," Corin said. Matthias set the lamp on the altar. "I know. I have said many things, but some words come back to you like birds in spring, and some do not. These come back." "Why me?" Corin asked. "Because you will keep the cross safe, if only to prove that you are not finished with the world. Because you do not kneel quickly, and you do not cut quickly either. Because you still listen to what the wind says when it rattles the shutters. And because the road will try to make you a liar, and I do not think it can." Corin smiled despite himself. "The road does not know my name." "No, but it knows your boots." They prayed then, poorly, the way men pray who have learned that the best prayers are those that can be remembered between one breath and the next. Matthias kissed the cross where the iron and wood met, like you kiss the brow of a child. Corin did not kiss it. He put his palm flat on the wood, and felt only the stubborn honesty of a tree that had been asked to stand upright a second time. In the morning, he carried the cross wrapped in ash-colored cloth and tied it across his back with a strap that crossed his chest. It weighted him like truth, which is to say, it was heavy until he decided not to calculate it any more. He thanked Matthias for the stew and the bed, and the old man's joke about slowness. The monk blessed him. The blessing was clumsy and beautiful, the way a lark's first flight must be. "Come back," Matthias said. "I will bring the cross back if I can," Corin said. "I did not say with the cross, I said come back." Corin bowed his head to hide the way his face had softened. "I will try," he said. The marsh turned the sky into a rumor. He followed the ash trees where they ran like saints' names in a litany, one to the next, a chain of gray bodies holding the path together. In places, the water lay black beneath a skin of ice so thin that it trembled in the wind like breath on a glass pane. He watched the mare's legs and feet as carefully as he watched the horizon. Trust is a kindness, but not a plan. He stopped when he came to a causeway of broken stones and a cottage built on a hump of earth like a turtle's back. Smoke climbed from the thatch. A woman stood by a rack of fish hung to dry in the bitter air. She wore a man's coat with the sleeves rolled, and her hair had the color of wheat when the sun forgets it. "Good day," he said, which is what men say when they are uncertain of whether a day is listening. "Good day," she returned. Her eyes moved to the bundle on his back and then away, as if she did not want to commit a sin so early as curiosity. "I am bound for the hill of Aelder," Corin said. "Is the causeway safe?" "Safe for a patient man, less safe for a proud one." "Then I will be patient," Corin said. She looked again at the wrapped cross. "That is a pilgrim's burden." "It is," he said. "Or a soldier's," she added. "It was," he said, and the past tense lay between them like a small, clean bone. She nodded at the mare. "Your horse is broad enough for water and biddable enough for wind. You may cross if you go where the marsh tells you and not where your feet believe the land should be." "You speak as if the marsh were a monk," Corin said. "It is older," she said, "but it listens just as badly. Come in and warm your hands. You are shaking and pretending not to." Inside the cottage, the air had learned a different language. Smoke spoke slowly, and the kettle spoke in soft syllables. He noticed 2 cups neatly stacked one inside the other. He noticed a man's boots by the door and a child's blanket folded on the bench. The woman noticed him noticing and did not look away, and in that not looking away there was a grace he had known once when a friend pulled a splinter from his palm while war raged 10 fields over. "My name is Anwin," she said. "This was my husband's house. It is mine now." "Corin," he said. "This was my king's land. It is the land's now." She poured him tea, the color of amber held to a window on a winter afternoon. The heat went through him as water goes through leather left too long in the sun, making everything softer than it should be. "You will need 3 things," Anwin said. "Twine, patience, and a reed." "Twine I have," he said. "Patience I am practicing. But why a reed?" She took a long reed from a bundle near the door and snapped it so that it made a hollow whisper. "The marsh speaks in small voices. Hold this to the water and listen. Where it hums, the stones lie beneath. Where it is still, the water is honest and deep." "And if the reed lies?" Corin asked, "because soldiering teaches you to mistrust the cleverness of simple tools. Then you will have a story to tell, or you will be something the water knows by name." He smiled. "You speak like a woman who has argued with rivers." "I have," she said. She placed the reed in his hand, and when their fingers touched, he felt the faint tremor of a muscle too long clenched. "My son lies beyond the causeway. The hill of Aelder watches him. I go sometimes when the sky is clear." She paused. "Tell Brother Matthias that Anwin of the marsh remembers the winter he brought milk when my husband died. I kept the cup." "I will," Corin said. "What is your son's name?" She said, "Leif." She looked at the bundle on his back. "If the cross is what the old ones say, it will not break beneath snow. If it is only wood and iron, then wood and iron sometimes remember what men forget." "What is that?" he asked. that they were trees and stones before they were saints. He left with the reed, and with his breath showing him the shape of his doubt in small clouded bursts. On the causeway the reed hummed when he held it to places where the stones hid beneath the skin of the marsh. He listened with the patience of a man who has learned not to step first where his eye wishes. Twice the reed told him to turn where the path was crooked, and twice he obeyed, though his feet did not believe the land should be. Each time the mare lifted her legs cleanly and set them down in safety. Each time the wind blew across the top of the reed and made a sound like a mouth deciding which word to say. At noon, the clouds unbuttoned themselves and spilled the powder of snow that did not trouble the marsh because the marsh already knew all the shapes cold can take. He thought of Anwen and the 2 cups and said a prayer that did not embarrass him because he did not put any names into it. He asked only that whatever the marsh had given her, it would not take away soon. Near evening, when the ash trees thinned and the water became a skirt that the land held up so it could walk, Corin came to a stand of willows bent as if they had learned humility at a school where wind was the teacher. A boy sat on a fallen trunk there, his feet not touching the ground. He had a coin on a string and was making it swing, as if teaching it to be a pendulum that kept time to the rhythm of his hunger. "Jep," Corin said. The boy looked up as if a hawk's shadow had crossed the sun. "You came the long way," he said. "I came the way the reed sang," Corin said, holding up the reed. "It told me you'd be here to mock me." "I am not mocking," Jep said. "I have never had 2 good things in 1 week." "Then winter is a soft-hearted thief," Corin said. "Have you eaten?" "Better than I did." Jep said. He lifted his chin toward the north. "There's a camp beyond the willows where men burn wood that does not smoke. They talk like merchants, but sit like soldiers. They watch the road the way a cat watches the rim of a bucket." "Mercenaries," Corin said. "Perhaps," Jep said, pleased by the big word. "They have a woman with them who mends, and a boy my size who does not smile. The big man has a scar across his mouth that makes him look like he says no when he says yes." "Do they stop everyone?" Corin asked. "They stop those who look like they carry stories. They do not stop woodcutters or men who smell of fish. They stop men who look like they know the sound of a bell from the inside." "And I look like that," Corin said. "You carry a bundle, like one a priest carries, and your horse wears her hooves like a lady wears rings. You have learned to see." "Hungry boys learn first," Jep said. He slid from the log. "I'll walk with you to the bend if you want the kind of company that does not add much." "I want the kind that knows when to be silent," Corin said. "I can do that," Jep said, and did. They reached the bend at dusk. The camp lay beyond, where the ground rose to dry itself out and the trees crowded together like old men around a story they had heard before. A fire burned with a heat so clean that it made the air into glass. The big man with the scar smiled in a way that could be mistaken for spitting if you did not look closely. The woman mending looked up only once, and in that once she saw she had counted all the knives, and not one of them belonged to her. "Good evening," the big man said. His voice had a city's polish and a soldier's sand. "Come warm your hands, friend."
Snow began in earnest the next morning, as if the night had been gathering itself into a single word. The world narrowed until it was only what the mare could see one step at a time. Trees hulked up like questions, and then disappeared, leaving only their shapes behind as if someone had cut them out of paper and blown them away. Jep walked with his head down and his hood up, and his mouth set in the line boys wear when they are learning to be men. Twice, Corin put his hand on the boy's shoulder without speaking, and twice the boy briefly leaned into it, a bird against a branch. They came upon the remains of a wayside shrine at midday. The roof had collapsed, and the saint's face had fallen away with it, so that only the hands remained. 2 stone hands open to the sky, collecting snow the way a widow collects small kindnesses, without complaint, and with a secret gratitude untouched by pride. In the drift at the base of the shrine, a set of footprints appeared, as if the walker had stepped from the air, walked 3 paces, and learned to fly. Corin knelt to touch the print. Meltwater pooled around his fingertip. "Fresh," he said. "Ghosts?" Jep asked, half to mock the word before it could mock him. "Pilgrims," Corin said, "or thieves, or saints who have learned to wear our boots. We'll follow." The prince led them up a slope toward a line of dark yews that looked like old men bent over at the waist, trying to hear the earth. At the top of the rise, they found a woman in a gray cloak kneeling beside a bundle that contained the unmistakable weight of a child. She had no fire. She had no food. She had wrapped the child so tightly there was no room in the cloth for hope to breathe. "Stop there," she said without turning. Her voice carried the thin edge of a blade that had been sharpened on grief. "That is what harm says when it wants your permission. I have none to give," Corin said quietly. The woman turned. Her face was that of someone who had not slept in an age of men. The child's face was blue-lipped and still, but not the stillness of death, the stillness of deep cold, a room with a small fire banked beneath ash, waiting for a hand. "Give me your hands," Corin said to Jep. "Quickly." Jep held out his palms, and Corin poured from the saddlebag a measure of wine into the boy's cupped hands, and then took the child and pressed those small icy fingers to the boy's warm skin. He rubbed until red returned, not evenly, not entirely, but obstinate as a weed in spring. The woman watched without breathing. "Do you have a name?" Corin asked her. "Rosen, if names still matter." "They matter when we speak to children," Corin said. "This one has not heard its in an hour. It remembers only the wind." "The End is an excellent name," Corin said, "but we will return him to the one you chose." He took the child inside his cloak, against the cross. He did not calculate the superstition of that moment, or its sacrilege. He thought only that wood holds heat better than air, and iron holds the memory of forging long after it forgets the hammer. He held the child until heat passed into the small body the way dawn passes through the skin of a pond, reluctant, slow, then suddenly everywhere. The child coughed. The sound was rude and perfect. Rosen made a sound as if someone had set down a brick she had carried in her chest for 2 winters. "Where do you go?" Corin asked her. "To the hill," she said. "They say there is a place to sleep there with the stone remember summer." "Come with us," Corin said. "I have barley and patience." "And a cross," she said, looking at the bundle on his back. "Yes," he said, "and a cross." She looked into his face as if deciding whether to tell him a long truth or a short one. She chose the short, which is always a kind of kindness. "My husband believed in saints until a cart took his leg. Then he believed in nothing. He died telling me the names of pigs we no longer had. The child has my brother's name. I am tired of winter when there is so much work in spring." "Then it is good we walk," Corin said. They moved together through snow that understood feet as if it had made them. The yews gave way to a beech wood where the bark ran smooth as skin, and the shapes of old scars made maps of storms. The child slept and woke, the way the living teach themselves to stay. Jep walked alongside Rosen and told a very poor joke about a man who thought he had married a cow because he loved milk. It was a joke without the bones of a joke, but Rosen laughed, quietly, and that laugh made the trees look briefly taller. When dusk came, it came early and without preface. They found an old shepherd's hut against a bank of earth and crowded into it with the mare's warm breath leaning in through the door like an animal that knows the difference between heat and light. Corin lit a small fire and fed it with twigs and patience. Rosen unwrapped the child and counted his fingers the way a prayer counts blessings and doubts both. They ate barley broth that tasted like a promise made by a poor man and kept. They said their names again, this time with the ease of men and women who had chosen to repeat themselves for the pleasure of making a sound that proves they have not been stolen. Corin listened to the wind and thought it carried not only snow, but a sound beneath snow, as if someone were ringing a bell in a room far away and the room had learned humility and would not claim it. "Sir," Jep said when the fire had folded in upon itself, "what is the cross? Is it magic?" "No," Corin said. And then after a moment, "Unless truth is magic." "What truth?" the boy asked. "That we are held together by small things. A woman's reed, a monk's clumsy blessing, a child's cough returning, a scar that hurts in the cold. Iron and oak and glass. The way a road becomes a kind of prayer when you walk it long enough." Jep nodded as if he had been told something excellent about bread. Rosen lifted her head. "When we reach the hill, what will it do?" "Perhaps nothing," Corin said. "Perhaps everything. Perhaps it will simply be the place where we say out loud what we carry. Sometimes that is enough." "And if the glass breaks?" she asked. "Then we will still have the wood and the iron, and we will still have each other, which is the only thing wood and iron have ever envied." They slept at last. The mare dozed like an old aunt. The wind paused to listen, and then went on.
It was late afternoon when he crossed the causeway again, the reed singing low in his hand like a contented kettle. At Anwin's cottage, he found 2 cups out upon the table, and steam threading the air in 2 places, and he allowed himself to sit and drink and say nothing, until saying nothing became, for a time, the most eloquent thing he knew how to do. "You have changed the way your boots meet the floor," Anwin said at last. "Perhaps the floor changed," Corin said. "Yes," she said. "Sometimes wood remembers that it was a tree." They smiled at the same time without planning it. He told her that Rosen and the child had gone to her. Anwin set her cup down with a small click like a bell offering advice. "Then the marsh is doing its work," she said. "Tell the monk to keep the cup. No, tell him to bring it back when he visits, and I'll wash it for him. That will make him believe in some small god he has not named." "I will," Corin said. He rode on with the cross making his shoulders honest. The evening turned the willows to ink and the ash to ghosts again, and the monastery rose from the dark like a worker who had learned to smile when the day finally folded its tools. In the yard, Brother Matthias held the lamp not between his palms, but lifted in his hand, as if he had forgot himself and become young. "You came back," Matthias said. "Yes," Corin said. "We all did, as far as the world would allow." Matthias took the cross and laid it upon the altar tenderly, as if it were a child with a fever who had decided to live. He touched the glass with the back of one finger and closed his eyes for a breath. "The crack," he said softly. It learned the word mend, not the whole word, enough. Matthias laughed, and the laugh made a shape in the chapel air that was almost visible. "This winter I have learned to prefer enough to everything." They ate onion stew again, and bread that had forgiven the oven. They spoke of small things, the reed and the causeway, a boy who had learned to admire his own knife, a woman who mended, while men invented new names for buying and selling fear. Before sleep, Matthias prayed for Corin and said the thing he had not said when the letter went out beneath a stone. "You have done a soldier's work with a pilgrim's voice. I bless the road that remembered you kindly." Corin slept in the same narrow bed where he had slept 2 nights earlier, which had grown in that time the way beds do when they learn the shape of a particular man's bones. In the deepest hour, he awoke to a sound like water moving beneath stone. He listened. He could not say whether the sound came from the cross or from his own chest, where an old door had opened and not been shut quickly. He slept again, and his dreams were simple, like a clean room with a chair in it. In the morning, he saddled the mare and tied the ash-colored cloth for stopping dust. Brother Matthias stood with his lamp, not unnecessary in daylight. "Where now?" Matthias asked. "Home," Corin said. "You may stay a while," the monk said. "I will pass this way again. There is a woman in the marsh who keeps 2 cups. I think one is for you." Matthias smiled the same half-mouth smile. "Then I must practice a kind of thirst that does not humiliate itself. Go with God, Sir Corin. Go with whoever taught you to say, 'Enough.'" Corin replied. He rode south along a road that had learned his boots and now welcomed them. At the ford, the woman in the red shawl wrung out linens that had nothing to do with death and everything to do with the daily mercy of clean cloth. In the reeds, a coin swung on a string from a branch. It chimed, and he knew without stopping that somewhere a boy's mouth had forgotten to be hard. Over the fields, a hawk moved with the seriousness of an old man and the lightness of a child who had discovered he can jump higher on frost. The cottage stood at the end of the lane with its shutters ajar, and the door did not resist him when he pushed it with 2 fingers, because the world had decided, for that one morning at least, not to be a gate. He set the letter upon the table, unbound from his wrist. He did not build a fire yet. He let the cold speak a little longer, because it had something to say that he might not hear in summer. Then he lit the hearth and warmed the kettle and sharpened the small knife that did everything but killing, and when the tea's steam rose, he found that it made a small cloud that held its shape with a crack running across it as fine as a hair, and he loved it more for that. He stood in the doorway while the water sang, and he listened to the wind trying each shutter, the way an old friend tries each door in a row of houses. When it found his, it stopped for a moment, and then went on, and he smiled and said aloud to nobody, or to the cross, or to the reed, or to the man who had taught him to taste dirt on a hill, "Enough." And because sometimes the world hears you when you do not ask it to, the bell in the ruined city of Ashen, far away and sleeping, made a single sound that could have been a memory or a bird taking off from a branch too thin for grief. He drank his key, which cooled exactly at the pace a man can forgive.